The picture that I have on the background is of early morning, November 13, 2021. Woke up to this incident literally, and when I just saw this thing, when I saw smoke billowing from close to the Rato Gumba, I just called up the fire brigade and the Nepal police. And after a number of frantic calls, I got this response. They were quite responsive. I thank them for this early response to my calls. Uh, it was like I thought it was some fire, like that was putting the area, the settlement close by in grave danger. There was a suspicion in my mind whether it was some sort of controlled burning of waste materials at that area. Nonetheless, I called up the authorities to just make sure that this does not spread, this fire does not spread any further and put lives and properties in grave danger. What also intrigued me at that moment was that this is the forest it's a part of this conserved area. It's part of this Shivapuri Nagarjun National Park. It is a protected area, and burning of like whatever materials, waste materials on the lap of those mountains is like quite insensitive on the part of whoever is doing it, and it is not a welcome act. In fact, such kinds of activities should be discouraged, especially on conserved areas. That was also the reason why I called up the authorities early in the morning. In fact, I take this incident as an ongoing onslaught on our mountains and on our hills, and largely on our nature conservation efforts. Uh, more often than not, we just get to read reports about another road opening on Yong Mountains. uh, VDC chairman, chairpersons of village development committees, bulldozing mountains, uh, wreaking havoc on those mountains, on those young hills and mountains in the name of development activities like construction of roads, mining, etc. These village development committee chairpersons have their own bulldozers, and they need to constantly uh, find work for these dozers. That is one of the reasons why our mountains are always under, our hills and mountains are always under this constant onslaught of bulldozers. Whether it's in the name of constructing roads with scant regard for environmental fragility of those young mounds, of those young hills, or whether it's in the name of mm, any other development activity, these dozers are almost always at work, because these VDC chairpersons have to just get returns on their investment. they made while purchasing those dozers. It's not only those village development committee chairpersons that are mounting attacks on our young mountains and hills. There are very powerful elements that are just attacking these mountains, like you can call them collectively, you can call them this mountain mafia that is so strong in Nepal that it just influences policy making and all. There are like centers of faith on top of mountains. Centers of faith of all kinds are there on uh, these young mountains and hills. So much so that some of these centers are off limits for members of the general public. Uh, I just let me just recall my own experience. I was visiting this place called Chakdul in Nagarjun municipality, and there was this sprawling facility. There was a sprawling monastery out there, and I just wanted to enter that place, that those premises, and have a look at that sprawling facility. At that, I just wanted to have a look of that uh, big uh, infra, that big sprawling, that big building just spread in a huge area. But there was this guard who would not allow me to just enter that facility. And I just keep wondering to this state as to why the Nepali nationals are not allowed to visit this part of their country. Why is it off limits for them? Is it that is the Nepali state aware of this kind of rule? Are we trying to create? Is the Nepali state trying to create some sort of isolated isles for suspicious activities? That is what I keep wondering about to this date. Then there are uh, all sorts of resorts and those facilities, recreational facilities springing up on those hills and mountains. There is this huge footprint of the Yeti group, and then there is this Chandragiri Hills group. All of them are like building resorts and whatnot on these mountains. We should not, the Nepali state should not forget that these hills, these mountains, and these woods are the result of collective efforts of communities, uh, collective nature conservation efforts of local communities, and it is a means of livelihood for these communities. But the irony of the situation, the irony is such that these mountains, these hills, and these jungles have become off limits for those communities that that played a big role in the conservation of those mountains and forests and hills. Then there are pension camps, Indian camps on our strategic hills, and there are maybe plans to build some more such camps We often get to read reports, reports about India seeking to build detention camps on our hills. One wonders, why do we need to have more of such camps? I'm raising this question because we have a well-functioning network of banks. We have a well-functioning uh, national network of banks. This means that the service seekers, the retired Indian soldiers, the retired Gurkha soldiers, those Nepali nationals can just withdraw money, and they can access their accounts, bank accounts, from anywhere. This means we don't need to have more of such pension camps on our strategic hills and mountains. But there are constant efforts to establish some more pension camps on our mountains and hills of strategic significance. One of the greatest gifts of the founding fathers of the United States was that they just gave the best of national parks to the American people. They just deemed those parks as common heritages for the future Americans. That was one of their greatest contributions to the American people. I remember the United States is a capitalist country, but they have these parks, these huge national parks open to the public. They can just visit those parks at affordable rates. There is no exorbitant uh, charge involved, whether it's Yellowstone, whether it's Yosemite, etc. Uh, but here we are supposedly gearing towards socialism, a country geared towards socialism, and here we have the huge footprints of the Indian establishment, of the Yeti group, of the Chandragiri Hills group, and those are men. I mean, the village development committee chairman on our mountains, and there are these groups that want to create view towers on those mountains. There are those groups uh, that want to establish their centers of faith on these mountains at the cost of the people, denying access to the people, to members of the general public. Clearly, our mountains, our hills are increasingly under the grip of what I have been calling, what I have been pointing as the mountain mafia, And it is time the government took some concrete action to just uh, free these mountains from the grip of this powerful mafia, and opened up opened up these parks, these mountains, and these hills, and these forests to the public. It is time the government made these wonders of nature the common heritage of Nepali nationals, as the founding fathers of the United States did. On this note, I wrap up this edition of Soft Talk. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And I ask you all to raise your voices to make these parks, these hills, these mountains, the true heritages of the commoners, of the people. I just request you to raise your voices to make them the public goods. uh, These places should be allowed for the public, open for the public, by just charging the minimum fee, minimum entry fee, and food and other stuffs, other facilities should be just, uh, they should not be just, the charges for food and other things should not be just exorbitant. It should be like kind of subsidized, and this will go a long way in conserving our hills, our mountains, and our forests. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening.